Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Bleep the Patriarchy.
Bleep
I'm
it,
glad,
y'all.
bleep it. I'm glad that we have such a nice guest with us today. This is the luminous one, our fandom luminary, Lo the Lynx, is with us today. Very happy to have them with us, and of course, my lovely co-host Amy is here as well. Um, and I'm glad to see all of our bleeple are out there in the audience to come and bleep it with us. Well, today our episode is called Bleep the Binary. And what is the binary, you might ask? Well, that's a great question. And as we're going through, please, people in the audience, do not hesitate to drop questions that you may have in the chat. These are things that we're here to, inform and educate and discuss and get the topic moving along, because the more informed we are about about the subject, the better we'll be able to, move forward with these types of relationships and topics in the future. So don't hold back. And, as they come up, I'll post them up on the screen so that, we can discuss those things. Okay. That being said, get that out of the way first, because I too, am not as informed, or I know I don't have that life experience as I was discussing with the panel beforehand. I don't have that life experience. I'm, it wasn't something that I had a lot of experience and interactions with, or even thought about that much, but as when I was younger, it just, I'm just here, sitting here, fitting in nicely on the shelf of, having um living a heteronormative life, I guess, living my privileged life, that, these topics were just not, in the forefront of my brain. So I'm glad to have this topic and have this discussion with these guys. So where do we start? Let's dig in.
Lo, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about what you do as an educator in real life and what you do
Yeah,
with your blog? And we'll
yeah.
go from there.
Great place to start.
Okay. Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Lo or Lo. My pronouns are they, them, and I am a grad student in gender studies focusing on trans studies in Sweden. And I also work part time as a sex educator. So I talk to teenagers about sex, sexuality, relationships, gender norms, consent, all of those good stuff that you wished you would have learned in school instead of whatever you were actually taught.
Which is
Um,
nothing in my case.
There's always that joke, what, the something is the powerhouse of the cell? I can't even remember what the thing was. There's always these random things you learn.
The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. I have actually used that in my life. But
That's awesome. Tell us a little bit about your blog, Lo.
Yeah, so obviously I'm very interested in these sort of feminist issues, and I've also a nerd like all of y'all. So I thought I would combine those things, and I write about ASWAF and historic materials and other stuff from a sort of intersectional feminist lens on my blog, Lo the Lynx. Um, so yeah, trying to sort of make these theories that I find very interesting about gender, sexuality, race, ethnicity, disability, and make them more accessible to people who haven't gone to college and haven't had the opportunity to learn those stuff. Because obviously theory texts can be really freaking complicated. So I wanted to make it a bit
I
more
think it's
accessible.
so easy to read, Lo. I every time I'm in class, Lo and I are both grad students, and I've been in a lot of theory classes, and I really like the way that they kind of dive into these texts. They make it really, really accessible for people that have not been exposed to it before. Lo, is it any chance you could put your mouthpiece down a smidge? Yeah, there you go. So when you do p and s, it'll be a little bit more, just to get that beautiful, clear, low voice going. So yeah, that's what Lo does, and we're so excited to have them. And we're gonna talk about the binary. And you know what we do here? We're gonna bleep it, y'all, because we're gonna bleep it good.
Now, I in my work experience, I'm a healthcare professional, and I work with all patients, and we have like some training that, of course, my employer gives, which is basic, minimal, and it kind of, because we have to treat the patients as they wish to be treated. It's their right to be treated a certain way, and it's just kind of like basic common courtesy to address and treat people with respect and dignity and the way that they prefer to be treated. So we have like minimal training, but I'm here to learn so that I can treat my patients in a much more compassionate way. So I'm glad to learn. You wanted to we can look at talk about the historical perspective if you want. We can go ahead and just dive into. We have an outline. We actually came prepared today. So we can kind of start. We can just start off with that. And so we're having the historical perspective from way back in the classical era, so to speak. We can start there. I don't know if we have a lot of even further back historical evidence for those types of discussions from, say, Babylon or Egypt or ancient Bronze Age societies, but we can start at the classical era because that's something that a lot of people are familiar with, Greek and Roman society. So we can kind of start there, since that is somewhat the basis of Western society that we have today, that greatly influenced the way that we think and how literature was written, and philosophy, Western beliefs. We'll say Western beliefs because that's kind of the society that that I was raised in, and I'm assuming that Aemy and Lo as well were somewhat raised in, coming from a European background. So we can start there. All right. Yeah. So where how would you say that these types of classical ideas have shaped what we see and believe today? Because the foundations of our patriarchal society that we live in today.
Already. Cheers.
Word already.
And I'm also going to fill in some blanks on the Eastern side as well and talk a little bit about traditional Chinese views on gender. But Lo, let's go ahead and talk about the origins of the binary. And where come from is my question.
Where it come from?
Where that come from?
I mean, I'm not sure exactly where it comes from. A lot of feminist theories have asked that question. Happy birthday, happy name day in advance to Lady Starfall.
Yes, happy
name day.
Glad to be early celebrating with you.
Yeah. Hey. But something that I think is interesting to look at is if you look at like the ancient Greeks, for instance, they had a very different conceptualization of sex and gender than we did. They used what researchers afterwards have called the one-sex model. So they thought that there was one sex, the male, and then there was the imperfect version of that, which was the female. So the female body had all of the organs inverted inside of the body, which I mean is sort of true. But if you look at the penis and the clitoris is the same organ, but one is outside and one is inside. And so sorry, I knocked over my lamp.
And this is the lamp punching section of the stream.
Yes.
Every really professional stream has one.
Is that lamp a misogynist, Lo?
Yes. That's why I'm so incredible. It's Aristotle's, actually.
Oh,
Anyway,
boo, Aristotle.
No.
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah,
so
Socrates and Aristotle. Socrates had his idea of what
yeah,
was it, the like the split, was it the split aparts, as I'm thinking? Like originally we as
wasn't
humans
that
were,
Plato?
was that Plato? That's some type, I know it was one of the
Yeah.
When I
classical
was little, I
things.
liked Play-Doh.
Ha!
I'm sorry. I had to do it. I
But
think
then,
also early medical theory looked at women as men with hormones, right? Like they didn't even have a
yeah,
separate theory of
No.
about the.
no.
I mean, we're complicated. You know what I'm saying?
And
Yeah,
our
And
humors
they're just like, oh, it's just men, but with a couple add-ons, which is not how our bodies work.
our
yeah, and
humors are just
that
all out of sorts. You know, we the was it the Galen theory of bodily humors of, you know, and women, female people were all so different. We had our humors were so out of balance because, you know, we have things like, you know, emotions and hormones and uh, changes that occur and cycles and things that they just didn't understand.
I also, I'm the queen of the plugs. Thank you very much. Lo's going to be on my channel again this Friday to do some buddy banter. So please check that out. It's 5 p.m. Eastern. We're going live on my channel. Sorry, plug over. Back to bleeping that binary.
yeah, and I mean this idea of the like 1-6 model of sex was prevalent until like the 18th century. So, I mean, it wasn't until then that people thought, oh, maybe it's two separate things, and then that's obviously not correct either. But the sort of contemporary Western view of sex only dates back till like the 18th century.
Yes, that great 18th century medicine that's just wonderful. So, yes. And that's when, oh, yes, difficult women get locked up in insane asylums. Yeah, that's great. I remember that. I did remember that.
Yeah,
Well,
and also
hysteria,
everyone who's
right?
not white is
Hysteria.
yeah, very bad. Not good.
Especially, and something that I love everything about Lo, but one thing I especially love about Lo is that they never forget how women of color, especially those who were born and given the title of woman of color, and also trans women of color, are obviously subject to a lot more violence and harassment. And they write a lot about that, especially, I'm sorry, plugging again. If you're a Song of Ice and Fire fan, their essay on Alara/Sorella is one of my favorite essays out there. So yeah, sorry, I just one more plug. I'm sorry, I'm a plug machine. I can't stop it. um,
Maker of polls and plugger of things.
that's what I do. Lo, I have a question. Now we talk about a spectrum. When did this idea of a spectrum kind of start to come into the zeitgeist rather than two opposite ends and you're one or you're the other, but there are other things in between, and now we have these kind of liminal ideas such as non-binary? And maybe you could also explain to us as to, in your own words, what non-binary is. I hate using the word is because I know it's like kind of reductive, but kind of everything's always been there. That's one thing that I want to like really hammer is these aren't new ideas. It's always been there. We just now have the vocabulary, and something that is here right now that we don't have the vocabulary for, hopefully in the future we'll have vocabulary for it. So what's this there non-binary, Lo?
Yeah, so the word non-binary, I think, started being used more like in the 90s, early 2000s in the West. But I feel like I have to acknowledge that in other cultures, that idea of there being two separate sexes and two separate genders has just not existed. There's lots of cultures that have two spirit people, for instance, and in other indigenous cultures throughout the world that have understood sex and gender in a completely different way from us, but has then been colonized by Western countries and forced to adapt to the Western ideals, and often people have been, punished legally for not conforming.
Yeah. I think
So
of the third gender that exists traditionally in Indian culture, meaning East India, not Native American, because I don't use that word because it's incorrect and Christopher Columbus was stupid. And I think also of China, eunuchs were considered a different gender.
Is that
And they were, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask if that was considered like what they would call the third sex or intersexed, or the third sex.
Yeah,
I think is the term that I'd heard.
yeah, the part of the India, this, and it has a word in Hindi, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. But there is this idea of they can identify as trans, but some people identify as intersex. It's kind of a lot together, separately. And I know a lot of African cultures as well. A lot of times those people that are outside of the traditional binary are thought to have more of a spiritual connection. And I'm sure Lo has read a little bit about that as well.
And I think that's also true of other native societies in the North America, North and South America, and even I believe in like areas of Northern Europe as well, like the people of the Sami culture. Is that also correct, Lo, with more of like a history of a shamanistic religious path where those who are between the sexes have a closer tie to the spiritual beings?
I know that in general that's a thing. I'm actually not aware of the history for the Sami people. I know a lot of activists who are queer and do a lot of work with that, but I'm not sure if of the history. But something I did want to mention is that, like you both talked about how you could be described as trans or intersex, and obviously these are Western terms and the reason we can't apply them perfectly on other cultures is because they have another way of understanding themselves, and we shouldn't try to make them fit into our categories, because that would be colonial in its own way, to force our categories on them. So there's definitely people who don't conform to our views on gender in the Western world. I wouldn't be comfortable calling them trans if that's not a term that they choose to use for themselves. Just want to make that disclaimer.
Yeah, the language around it can be somewhat tricky, or you want to be careful. I know I do. I want to be careful when speaking about these types of things, to use the language appropriate for the person that I'm speaking with. So you have to kind of find out what that is. You know, if I am unsure, I hopefully I'm not offensive when I ask, but it's important to ask. You know, if they're not readily, forthcoming, it's not apparent or obvious, you know, you should definitely ask in the most respectful way possible. Like,
We've got a question from someone with a really cool name, by the way.
Is that Amy Do? Okay. How does story?
Is this the Aemy that I think it is? Because
I don't have an alt account, I swear.
No, because it's this Aemy from the Girls Gone Canon Discord, because we talked about this wonderful bird earlier today.
Oh, you're right, it might be her.
So how do historians, anthropologists distinguish between the intersexed and the non-binary?
Yes, question. Very good question. So, just to so everyone's clear, intersex means that your body isn't like traditionally female or masculine. Just like biologically speaking, your body is in between those two poles, sort of. Hey, Amy. That can look very different from different people. How if it can make your genitals look different. It can be like hormonal levels. It's
It,
very individual.
so
But
it's
so
purely
intersex,
from a physiological,
yes,
hormonal, anatomical perspective. It is a fact of it is a fact. It is a condition of birth that your your bits may be indeterminate.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that about 1% of kids born in Sweden, at least, because that's the stats I happen to know, but about like 1% have genitalia that the doctors can't clearly say is male or female.
Mhm.
So that's intersex. That's the body, and then non-binary is your gender identity, and that you don't identify as male or female, man or woman, but something in between or outside of that.
Mhm.
And if you look from a historical perspective, then we have to realize that these terms are very new. Intersex, I don't know the exact origin, but I would say like maybe the 70s or something
That sounds about
was,
right.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
yeah.
Or at least when it was being brought up as, in medical discussions.
Yeah, before that, you have used other terms, but for that, for those people. But and non-binary is of course also very new. So it very much depends on the person doing the research. But there's a Danish gender historian who's called Sølve Holm, who has done a lot of great work on this. I cite them in my Alaris essay, for instance. And they talk about how you have to look at how people express their gender in the historical sources you have. For instance, they've done a lot of work analyzing biographies and journals. So you have to look at what words do people actually use and what words are available for them to use, and who are they communicating to. So, for instance, a lot of you have probably heard of Lille Elbe, the person depicted in The Danish Girl. And in their own biography, they say that they're a hermaphrodite. And describe their body in a way that is more or less medically impossible for it to exist in that way. But probably that was just the words they had available to them to describe what they were feeling and to express a need to get support from the medical community and doctors. So you have to be sort of critical of, okay, but what words could these people use to describe themselves and describe their feelings and describe their experiences? And what words could they use to make other people understand? So it wouldn't make sense for someone to say, "Oh, I'm a woman. I'm a woman, even if my body looks like this." That wouldn't make sense in like the 19th century. People wouldn't understand that. But if you said, "Oh, but I'm a hermaphrodite," then people would say, "Oh, okay,
Oh
that's a
yeah,
thing that exists
I remember that
that we
from
can understand."
I remember that from classical studies. The
Yeah.
hermaphrodite. It was a myth. There was a myth about that.
Yeah, exactly. So people would understand that, and then you could say, "Oh, but since I'm a hermaphrodite, but I'm actually a woman. So could you just like make some changes over here, and I can live as a woman?" That would be a way for people to like explain to other people what they are, and
Right.
that's in the end what language is, a way to try to explain things to other people.
Yeah, and it's all about language, which is how we express our thoughts and feelings, which is all internal. In the mind, internal. Then you have whatever the f is going on physically with your body. So it is kind of like two worlds. The internal and the external appearance. So that's
I do find interesting though, and I mean terrible and bullshit, which is this obsession with the genitalia that we see. Like there's this, I I'm not going to get too political, but I mean, I have to when we're talking about this particular issue. There was a politician in America who wanted to have any girls that wanted to compete as girls in school sports, that they have to get checked to make sure that down there they're what they have a vagina, essentially. And it's like he's literally advocating for looking at little girls' parts because he's so obsessed with the binary and that it has to be maintained. And so something I've been thinking about, Lo, is the way in which society, especially Western society, make sure that there are distinctions. If you go to the Oscars, there's best actor and best actress. Why can't they compete, right? You have sports, it's different. You have bathrooms. Oh my God, bathrooms in itself could be a whole stream.
As I live in North Carolina.
Yes, you definitely know. I mean, I can talk historically in China, foot binding. From about the year 1000 until 1920, essentially, women's feet, especially upper class women, would be broken so that they're smaller and bound literally with cloth that they would have to change and wash every day. And it's so painful to distinguish them from men. So I guess these are all just a bunch of thoughts and not really a question, Lo, but I'm just wondering kind of what do you think society is, especially the patriarchy, is trying to do by making these distinctions? What is it all just to perpetuate the patriarchy? Is there something more going on there?
I mean, I think a lot of it is about just control in general. Just if you're making a decision for another human being, that's control. You know, forcing or making someone else conform to your ideal is, you know, because I, the person who has the power, says this is how it shall be. You know, that's kind of sucks. You know, if you break it down to just like the
binary, it kind of sucks.
It kind of sucks.
Thanks for coming to BTP. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, the patriarchy.
Thanks for coming to our pets.
The big P kind of just sucks.
Yeah, and I know there's a Swedish professor called Yvonne Hirdman who wrote a really good article on this in like even the 80s. I think it's published in 88, where she breaks yeah.
Sorry, that was just too much.
Where she breaks down and she argues that basically the patriarchy is upheld by two different things. One is the separation of the male and the female and the feminine and masculine. So it has to be separate. Men cannot be feminine, women can't be masculine. So the binary is a must. And then the hierarchy, making it into a hierarchy is the second part, so that the masculine is above the feminine. So separating and making one better than the other is like the ground stones of the patriarchy, according to her. And I think that's a really good way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
That is a great way to put it. Yeah, and like when Nessie and I also like to talk a lot about toxic masculinity, which is going to get its own episode of BTP. We always emphasize that this hurts everyone, no matter if you're quote unquote on top or not. So I also think, Lo, that's a great point, because we can easily apply that to yin and yang theory, also known as yin and yang. There's this idea that they need to be in balance, and look, there's a white dot in the black dot in the black section, and a black dot in the white section. They're equal. No, bitches, they're not, because the yang, the male, is above the female. The yin, it is actually hierarchical. It should be in balance, but one is favored over the other. So they're separated, even if they have a little bit of each, just like the first thing aspect that Lo mentioned. And then the second one, that's hierarchical. It definitely works for the yin and yang theory. And I think it is misleading to a lot of Westerners, because they do hear a lot about balance and how there's a little bit of each, the element in the other one, but that doesn't mean that they're equal. And I think that whenever you have dualism, there's always going to be one that is favored over the other. So that's why Taoism is inherently against dualism, but uses dualism enough. It's that I could do a whole video on that, but It's weird how, Lo, what do you think about how it seems like our society has been geared toward dualism? Like something about that really makes humans comfortable. Like we get kind of entrenched in that. Why is that?
Gave me the easy questions. No, but I don't know. But I think there's something with like good and bad, us and them, and just wanting to make things easy for ourselves, I guess. I'm sure there's some psychological theory about this, but
I'd like to throw in, there is that portion of our brain's thought patterns, and it's colloquially termed the valley of the uncanny, meaning we as a species are visually perceptive. First and foremost, this is why we are upright and our eyes are facing forward, because our vision helps us determine threat assessment. So you have this little area where when your brain is processing something visually first, unless you're blind, but normally visually first, and it sees something that does not easily fit into its supposed categories, the way that we think, the way that we categorize and organize threats or encounters, that it just says, I don't know what to do with this, therefore I just freak out. It's like why humans, some people have this problem with like dolls and robots. It's like it looks enough like a quote human that it's supposed to be a familiar thing, but it's just enough not that it gives us a weird feeling. We just don't know what to do with that feeling. So it's kind of where when we encounter something, a person that we cannot easily categorize and we don't know what to do with it, it kind of instinctively is off-putting. So we're like, ugh, I just don't know what to do with this information. So, I mean, that's one way of looking, of thinking about it. Our little monkey brains are just having a hard time processing it into, okay, what is that? How do I deal with this? How do I act in a societal way that I have been programmed, or my society tells me I should act? Weird. People are weird.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a really good point. And for just to plug some of my things for once, I just
don't you dare take my shtick, Lo.
I just released an essay on historic materials, specifically about the Secret Commonwealth, where I talk about this a lot, and how things that people don't understand is something that they're scared of and repulsed by, and will act out towards that thing. Whether in that essay I talk about trans people and disabled people, for instance. And if something that's like weird and not something you're used to, then you get like scared and mad at the same time.
Right.
And you're likely to act out in some way, even if it's not like physically maybe, but it could just be like looking weirdly at the person. And I mean, that's part of the motivation behind a lot of hate crimes.
True. Kelly, I just wanted to find what she said. That she was asking whether this type of thought is like an us-them division. And it could rightly be, but this even goes back to like on a primitive brain level, where say you're maybe even like your reptilian brain, which is just can I eat it? Do I have to fight it? And can I mate with it? And that's the three questions that it goes through. So it is. That's how reptilian brains work. So it does its quote threat assessment, and is this something that I can mate with? Well, I don't know. Is this something that I should eat? well, it looks like I do, and maybe it's tasty. Uh, or do I just have to instinctively just fight with it because it's different enough from me that I just don't know what else to do with it, so I'll kill it, and that will take care of the problem.
There's also this kind of I'm curious about this thing and I need to point at it thing. Like I'm obviously a cis woman, but when I was in China, I do speak Mandarin, so I understood when people were talking about me. And there was literally this little girl that was walking with her mom. She stopped dead in her tracks and pointed at me and was like, "Look, mommy, there's a white girl." So it's like, because I was in a part of China where they don't usually see non-Chinese people or non-Asian people. And so I was kind of like, oh, wow, that was, I mean, out of the mouth of babes, right? Kids don't really have that filter. And sometimes I appreciate that because, like, I know all of the adults were thinking the same thing. Like, look, there's a white girl. So the kids really said it. And so I kind of could see something similar to when you look at someone and they don't fit into the binary, then you're like, look at that. Like, just, I'm so curious and surprised that like, I do remember the first time, I remember it very vividly, that I saw a trans person. I was in an Olive Garden. I was 11. And I was like, and my mom was like, Amy, don't stare. And I was like, okay. Like looking back down at my pasta, but I was so curious about it. And there is this like automatic brain reaction of curiosity, or for some people, it would be aggression, right? We have this automatic, like our brain turns on, it kind of lights up when we see something that doesn't fit.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And I'm in no way saying my experience in China was similar to a trans person. Obviously, it's very different. I just have never, that's the only time I've ever experienced someone literally pointing at me and saying what I am. It was very surprising.
Right. I had a very similar experience as well, Amy, when I was in kindergarten. This was in 1970 something. I'm not going to say how far back it was, but it was a while ago.
My mom was born in the 50s, so it's fine.
I was born in the 60s, child of 1969, Summer of Love. Hey, represent that.
Nice, 69, sorry.
Okay.
You were born in a blessed year, Nessie.
I was. Year of the car. So I was in kindergarten. It was my first day of kindergarten, and it was basically me leaving the womb, if you wish, because I was very sheltered as a child. I was only surrounded by family and a few outside people who were members of their inner social group. In other words, people that looked and acted just like us, you know. And I went to school my first day in kindergarten, and I was the only Caucasian person, not only in my classroom, but in my entire school. So everyone there was like, "Ooh, look at her. She's different. She's different from everybody else." And, you know, it was like, what do I do here? So, and it was a very, you know, it was a different experience. It was, I didn't quite know what to do with myself. I just like, okay, well, let's play and let's do some blocks and let's color some pictures and, you know, do recess things and whatever. And, you know, they were just as curious about me as I was about them, because, you know, especially like the girls in the class, they were like, you know, ooh, you know, we're touching one another's hair, and we're talking about, you know, how we're doing our hair differently. So yeah, it was a very big culture shock for me. So I can kind of, you know, point it out, you know, like, hey, you're the different one here, you know, you're the one that's different from everybody else around you. So it kind of, you know, and obviously it stuck with me, because here I am, I'm 51 years old, and I still remember the first day that my mom put me in the classroom, and I was like, oh, what's going on here? So it can be. And even though I, you know, am in the vast majority of, you know, life experiences, you know, that little bit of that, you know, little time that, you know, I felt so different from everyone else around me, you know, and not knowing how I fit in with the group. You know, I can only imagine what it would feel like to, you know, live that experience every day. Yeah. Whew.
I was gonna say, I thought that it was gonna end with, and then they saw I was a ginger and said, "Look, mommy, that girl has no soul." But that's not where it was going.
No, they were much kinder than that. You know, they.
I don't think that joke was in the zeitgeist yet. I think that's a newer idea.
No, I don't even think the term was where I'm from. So yeah.
It's like, apparently sometimes Kelly always catches it, jaded redhead in the chat. Sometimes I say ginger discrimination on accident instead of gender discrimination. It happens.
It is a thing. It is a thing. And ginger is not exactly a nice word. Oh, Kelly's
I do
telling
it
us.
just for you. You're one
Yeah.
of my favorite redheads. Come on.
All right, y'all, calm your tits, apparently. Oh, right. So
Let's live back on the rails.
yeah. So the talk about, the colonialism aspect of it. That's, Amy and I both live in an area that was heavily colonized, to say the least. We had, people came to, the United States or North America or what have you. Not very far from where I live, by the way. And with very, very ingrained ideals about how things were supposed to be. And, just pretty much steamrolled over all of the culture and, societies that were here. And we kind of have to live with the results of that. So I live, less than an hour from the first colony in the first English colony in the United States in Roanoke Island, and also not very far from Jamestown, which is we tried 2.0, that one stuck. But there were
When
a
in
lot.
doubt, try
Yeah.
again.
Try again. And that, that's, just imprinted. The Amy, excuse me, Kelly earlier in the chat was talking about the Algonquin Society, which is primarily what the population here was. The Algonquin tribes, the people who lived around the rivers and forests in this area, and they had a completely different idea of how people could live. Just steamrolled right over that and not even thinking twice about it. It was also imperative for let's throw the religion in here. Let's go ahead and throw
We already did politics. We got to do religion too.
Yeah, we got to get the trifecta. They were, the people who came here were wanting to make a lot of money. Capitalism is a big thing. We'll throw that in there too. And it was more imperative for them to, extract what resources that were available, and then to try to understand the people that were actually living there, where they were trying to extract said resources from. And also, people felt it was their quote unquote Christian duty to tame the savages. Be they in North America, South America, Africa, in Indian subcontinent, Australia.
And manifest destiny was thought of as God ordained, right? It was God who said, "You may take everything."
Yes. And white men landed and said, "This is mine.
And I see it, and it is good, and it is mine." It's basically
pretty much how that worked.
And Lo, you have a lot of experience in colonial studies. Sorry, gotta plug it again. Lo has been on my channel to talk about colonialism in his Dark Materials. So how do you see kind of this idea of colonialism being inherently patriarchal, and therefore the binary also being tied in with colonialism as well? And I'm gonna go ahead and drink to that one.
That's a big old drink.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, that's a huge question. There's a lot going on there, Lo. Tease it out as best as you can.
Well, I mean, for one, like all of this is tied together. Like you talked about, Nancy, there's the capitalism, there's the colonialism, there's the patriarchy, there's the religion.
Doing it again.
all of those things are tied together to uphold a certain group of people on the top of the hierarchy and the rest of us just down there below. So obviously views on gender and the gender binary were very important when people colonized different parts of the world, and like you say, to control the savage or whatever idea they had, was very tied in together with like the white European way of living is good, where women are behave where women are behaving in a certain way, very proper, very like the middle class housewife of the like 19th century Victorian times, just staying at home, being pretty, not doing anything else, being white. That was like the ideal, and that was what was exported into other countries, and people there were expected to conform to that. And when Europeans came to other countries and saw that, hey, there's people doing things differently here, they were like, oh, that's because they're lesser than us, and that's the reason why we are better and should control them. And if you just look at like the legal aspect of it, British colonial laws have been a part of a lot of African countries, for instance, for a long time after they stopped being British. And these laws outlawing homosexuality, for instance, have really affected these countries for a long time, even after the British left. So, I mean, that's one part, just legal aspects and controlling people and seeing them as lesser. And then if you go on to the sort of scientific side of it, I mentioned before that it was during like the 18th century where you sort of made up the modern idea of what gender is. And that was very tied up with race. That was the time when like racial biology really became a thing. You started people starting measuring skulls and measuring whatnot, people from different parts of the world, and deciding which are the best of them. And like the white man is the best, and then the white woman is sort of okay, and then like Asian people is one thing, and black people from Africa is one thing, and then we have the apes, and they're very close to black people, obviously.
Right. And
So
anything that was not a white European male could be at any time property.
yeah,
Considered
exactly.
property. With
Exactly.
no
And they said, look at all of this science that proves that we're right in thinking white men are the best. So
Yeah.
they use science to as a sort of argument. And
those same people, those same people that promoted the fake pseudoscience around one of my big pet peeves, which is BMI, or the body mass index, which is not based on science. It is not. People, I'm throwing this out there as, don't believe it as fact. It was not even brought up. If anyone, body mass index, BMI, basically how tall you are determines how much weight you should carry or be, no matter whether you're healthy or not, you are considered obese by this calculation. But yeah, it's all part of the whole eugenics cycle, and it was to find like what is the average size of a European person. Like, okay, well, why does that going to categorize whether someone in Africa or someone who's native from East Asia or what have you is the wrong size, not healthy because of their height versus their weight?
Also, Stephen brought up this idea of natalism, right? Focusing on white women being incubators, essentially. I am of the opinion, and I will die on this hill. You all know I die on many hills, but this one too,
Right.
that a lot of the anti-abortion kind of movement is because they don't want white women getting abortions. And it's this idea that, we have to propagate a certain race. And so I also think that there is this idea of protecting white women, right? So I'm from Oklahoma, the Tulsa race massacre, not a riot because the people of color there were not rioting. There was a massacre of what was called Black Wall Street because there were a lot of really successful people of color there. And it started by a white woman saying that a black man made a pass at her in an elevator, and that did not happen. She admitted on her deathbed it did not happen. And we have this idea of we need to protect white women from specifically black men. And that is once again this idea of the binary of men, white men, are meant to protect their white women who are at home, right? So, sorry, going to go back to yin and yang again. The yin, the feminine energy, is inactive. It is of it's the nay, the inside, meaning the home, and then the yang, the male energy, is active and is the why, the outside, because men go off to jobs and they go off to drink and they go off to the pleasure quarters, so there are all this idea of there's a spatial aspect to gender in traditional Chinese thought that I think is also there in the West, because women, right, we see it in Song of Ice and Fire, right, women fight their battles in the birthing bed. There's this idea of domesticity and specifically natalism. And it's not the only reason, but it's one of the many reasons that I don't want to have kids, is because it has been, people say when you have kids to women, right? They say it to men too, but men don't get asked when you're having a kid as much as women are. There is this forcing of motherhood on women throughout generations, and there's absolutely no way statistically that every woman that had children throughout time wanted it, but they had to, especially white women. For England, it was literally a campaign
for
in England.
Yeah. One of the first things, I'll go back to Jamestown. I wish Kelly was on the stream because she could bring so much knowledge of this.
Kelly, hurry up and throw on some makeup. We're sending you the StreamYard link. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, we're going to send the StreamYard link. I wanted to bring up this thing that was called the tobacco brides, which were basically mail order brides who their passage from Europe, specifically, I think Great Britain, was paid for by people from Jamestown area that were farmers and had grown tobacco, and to sell their tobacco. So for the these women came here to be auctioned. They were auctioned off to the highest bidder for approximately like 150 pounds of tobacco. That was their worth. So these women were bought and paid for. And of course, they would be expected to be brides for these people, that this man that just basically bought them, So that's like, okay, I've got a sales ticket.
Yeah.
I scanned, barcoded, and I've been sold, to pay most of that went to their, to pay for their passage to come across. So, there's pretty much, they were just sold on the docks.
We also have Vietnamese women and Filipino women who, when in China, when the one-child policy was enacted, which was in the 70s until literally 2015, they would literally order Vietnamese brides to China because there was a 20-to-1 ratio of men to women. There were just too many single dudes, basically.
Right.
And same thing in India for the exact same reason. People were having selective abortions when they found out it was going to be a daughter. And so they had Bangladeshi and Pakistani brides being shipped essentially into India. So you do have this idea of, you notice when I say, okay, Indian, well, they'll take from Bangladesh and from Pakistan because they have similar kind of, I hate to use this term, but like racial similarities. Same thing in China. They weren't, they were taking in brides who are of Asian descent. So you still have this racial aspect to birth that is also, I think, integrated into the binary as well, because you have this idea of keeping this idea of birth not just racialized but genderized as well.
Yeah, and I noticed that people were talking about eugenics in the chat. For instance, the blue lemon tree that you pulled up earlier, Amy, talked about how human sexuality is wrapped up in white supremacy. Um, and that is definitely true. I live in a city where we, until like, what, uh,
Oh, sorry.
60, 70 years ago, had the state's Institute for Racial Biology, which researched.
Sorry, quickly before Kelly, if you'll check your Twitter, you should have a DM. We
Yeah.
may have a surprise guest.
Hope you don't mind, Lo.
No, that's fine. I just we sterilized a lot of people because we thought they shouldn't procreate. If it was, I mean, it was Sami people, it was Roma people, it was disabled people, it was trans people, working class women who weren't thought to be fit as mothers, because apparently that's a thing. I mean, sex workers, lots of people who were just either seen as degenerate and not fit to pass on their genes, or thought to be not fit as parents. And that's obviously very tied up in patriarchy, white supremacy,
Ooh,
everything.
said it. They said it. They said it.
Oh,
There they go. Yeah, and Lo, you, especially with the Sami people, I know that you have a lot of you've done a lot of work on that as well, especially when it comes to his dark materials. And I really do also want to emphasize this idea of keeping the race white. For a long time in America, if a white woman married outside of her race, she would lose her citizenship. She would basically switch to the citizenship of her husband. So if I married a Chinese man, I would become a Chinese citizen, and that's a very obvious example that was a law in the books of how the law, which is Western laws created by white men, this kind of trying to keep, you know, things the way that they want them to be.
Yeah, and I mean, there's been a million different laws controlling gender in a myriad of ways. And just one that comes to mind is how there used to be laws about cross-dressing in a lot of countries. I mean, the reason that the Stonewall riots, well, one of the reasons, but the reason that the police gave for doing a raid at the Stonewall Inn was that people were cross-dressing there, and that was illegal. You could not, at that time in the 60s in the US, wear garments belonging to the other sex. That was illegal. So the police said, hey, we're just gonna arrest all of y'all. That, and people were sick of it and fought back. And that's why we have Pride today, essentially. I mean, lots of other work, obviously, too, but
yeah, the Stonewall was the kind of the straw that broke the camel's back as far as fighting back. And also, you know, talking about laws that had to do with that, the Stonewall that LGBTQIA plus friendly club was able to exist because they were working with the mob. They had to do everything under the table. That was the only way that they were able to exist, was because they were paying the mob who were paying off the cops. So there's this idea of people that are on the outsides of white male power having to do all of these negotiations and do really sketchy stuff in order just to exist. And there also were there was a defense, and it still tries to be used today, but there are many places where it's not allowed. But a defense of like they would look at a trans woman and misgender them and say he made a pass at me. That's why I beat him up, right? Because I was uncomfortable.
Trans panic defense.
Yes, the trans panic defense. And I know there are a couple of states, I believe California is one of them, that is outright like dismiss that as a defense. Like you cannot bring it up in court. In fact, it hurts your case if you bring that up in court, basically. So here we have literally like I said, but we have these ingrained ways to excuse white heterosexual males for enacting violence on people, right?
Yeah.
People who are humans, just like all of us, but because they make that one white man uncomfortable, he therefore deserves to react violently. And for many years, our courts have excused and even encouraged that.
Yeah, exactly. And just to go a bit deeper on that horrible part of it, I mean, so a lot of violence towards trans people, and especially towards trans women and trans women of color, black trans women, is that, you know, yes, that's a very good point, Blue Lemon Tree. Hi.
Hi. Oh, we have an actual historian in the house. Thank you for joining us today, Kelly. I did see your comment in the chat. I'm glad you could join us to put a little light on some of these things. And yes, thank you for correcting me there. That what they we're talking about the what I was saying about the tobacco bribes. They weren't forced to do this. That wasn't like, here, I'm shoving you on a boat and you're going to Jamestown Colony and you're going to be married off to some dude. Go, Kelly.
Yeah, this was a in a lot of public schools, this is referred to as the bride ship, but it was actually more than one ship, so it's a little bit misleading. There is I think there's a TV show about it as well. I can't remember what it aired on, but it's about the first single women to be sent over to the Jamestown Colony, and they had to apply kind of as if it were a job, but it was usually the situation in England. They might not have had very good marriage prospects, which of course for a woman, that is what you're intended for, to be married off. And sometimes the potential husbands in the colony would essentially pay a bride price. And Nessie, what you were saying about the tobacco, essentially the tobacco is cash money back then. That's how you made transactions, because of course there's no bank over in the colony yet. So tobacco was used as a form of currency, and you would pay for things with sometimes just tobacco, or what they refer to as tobacco notes. And it's very much like using cash. It's like a line of credit. But one other thing I wanted to comment on was before a little bit of a callback to the colonization issue and barbarian, the uncivilized barbarian. John White was the governor of Roanoke, and a lot of his personal watercolors were used to show off in England and other parts of like the continent, Europe, what some of the natives looked like, and they were paired up very intentionally with images of the Picts. Essentially the Scottish people, and England in the early years of colonization of the New World, England was still in the process of colonizing Ireland as well. So a lot of images of the native Irish and the native Scottish were compared to the Native Americans, the uncivilized savage. So it was kind of like a justification. We made their lives so much better, bringing over, a modern society, religion. I love there's a quote from the movie Rum Diary that Giovanni Ribisi's character says, "We brought in Jesus like a bar of soap." I love that quote. So yeah,
Jesus and the unwashed savage.
Yes. But yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to comment on. Lo, it's very nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you too. What you said about those paintings really reminded me of this concept of the four continents. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. There's this concept of the four continents in paintings where the continents are depicted as women. So there's Europa, who's very like like a woman going off to war, sort of Greco-Roman, and then there's Asia, who's very like Oriental, and then there's Africa, who's very like I don't have clothes on. There's a tiger in the background. There's a lion, and then
the whole savage motif.
Yeah, and then sort of the same with America. So women who we will control, us Europeans, will conquer these women, these continents.
Yes. Next month we'll get a little bit more into the aspect of I guess patriarchy and misogyny on board ships.
Oh yeah,
bleep a whole resident boat expert. Bleep it, y'all.
Yeah,
Nessie, I made sure that I'm off that day as well. I should have texted you last night. I meant to say that I will be off that day. So
good. Well,
yeah, it's another like control thing when it comes to women or women's bodies. Yeah,
I'm excited to bleep it on a boat. I'm on a boat. Anyway.
There's a lot of bleeping on a boat.
Bleep it on a boat. Yes. That's gonna be exciting.
Yeah. So we've been going for about an hour, and now that we have our, a good time for a pause, we'll go ahead and do our mid-roll shout outs and things. And this is the point in the string where I don't have, because I don't have a patronage, I don't have, people that pay money for this to happen. I just like to thank each and every person who is here in the chat. We've got some great people here today. Jolie, thank you so much for joining us at this very Euro-friendly time. Of course, my brothers Stephen Stark from Here Be Dragons and John Webster Film are here. We've got guest the Blue Lemon Tree. Nice to have you here, new to the chat. We've got Lady Leaf, Kate Bertinsky, Wheezy Squeeze Box. Oh, hey, Sarah, Isabel Harper. She's here in the chat. Of course, we had Kelly, who's now joined us on screen. Ridiculous Ed, Lady Starfall, and various and sundries, others. I think I saw, Amy with the multiple Y's is here. I think I saw Danny McKay earlier. Oh, I want to make sure I get everybody.
Did you mention Micah? I don't remember if you...
Micah, well, I'm glad you're here. I haven't gotten that far, but I think you are. I think I saw you earlier. Hi there. Yes, and if I missed your name, I'm still very happy and thankful that you're here. I've got a few things coming up on the channel. Our next episode is going to be on the 24th. We're back to the Magical Menagerie. Going to dip our toes back into that. My co-host here, Amy, is going to be joining me, and we're going to be discussing, the Phoenix.
Oh, I'm so excited, Nessie. I have so many thoughts.
Yeah,
I'm excited. And I'm excited to get back into the mythical beasts and such. It's very fun.
We spent a lot of time talking about the dragon, so now it's time to talk about the contemporary of that. We're going to talk about the Phoenix, both Eastern and Western. Also, Kelly mentioned that she will be joining us on the 10th of March here on Bleep the Patriarchy. We're going to have an episode. Bleep it. Bleep
and those of you that
y'all.
are watching, also, this is the mid-roll. We have another hour after this. I always emphasize, don't leave. Don't turn that dial. Sorry, go ahead, Nessie.
Yeah, that will be March 10th, which thank you, Kelly. I appreciate you getting time off from work that day to join us.
I'm gonna need to put that on my calendar.
And in March, we're going to finish out possibly our my series on the Avalon series, and we have our special guest, Lady Gwen. You may have heard from her from such things as Radio Westeros. Will be joining us for a discussion there. So yeah, a lot of good things coming up. Aemy, maker of polls and
Gotta do it.
Do
I swear I'm gonna do it as quick as I can. You all know I have a channel and a blog, but I turned it into a podcast. So if you want to listen about more of the luminous lows, I gotta it's like a weird. There we go. If you want to hear more of their wonderful thoughts on gender and colonialism, I have them on in 3 of the episodes. We talk about His Dark Materials. Season 2, we talk about colonialism and His Dark Materials, and we have a co-authored essay about Lyson Omar. We look at him through a queer and Orientalist lens. We have a great time. And Lo, I'm excited for this. They are going to be on my 3rd episode of Buddy Banter. It is a new series I started where I have a friend on my channel to banter with them about a topic of their choice. And Lo has decided on a topic that we are both very passionate about, which is contemporary issues in fantasy, and why Lo and myself, we can't really separate the two. We can't separate art from artist and contemporary issues and the time that the author is in from the work itself. So we're going to talk about that. And I know some of you in the chat will do that and will say, but I can separate art from artists. So we're going to talk about it. It's going to be fun. So I have a lot coming up. I'm going to just stop it there, but I do Song of Ice and Fire, His Dark Materials, and I just started doing Avatar: The Last Airbender content. So I have a video about that out, and I'm going to have a full panel talking about the Air Nation, and that should be out next week.
Okay, I just want to put this up on screen real quick before it goes away so we can address it after the mid-roll. Lo, do you have anything coming up on your blog, or are you going to be anywhere doing anything?
Well, obviously, I'm hanging out with Aemy later this week. Just recently, I published an essay about His Dark Materials that I mentioned before, about navigating the world as a marginalized person, specifically in the His Dark Materials world as a person who don't have a demon. What is that like? How do people treat you? And I'm drawing some parallels to being trans and being disabled in our world. And that's very spoiler heavy for the UK Commonwealth, so be aware. And then after that, I'm gonna start working on an ASWAF essay about the Night of the Laughing Tree and doing a sort of trans reading of that. Very much inspired by Learned Hands, which I also was on quite recently, playing Howland Reed in their Horny Jail episode.
Howland Reed has a Swedish accent and is canon now. And Lo, you also eventually, I promise, because I need to finish the 3rd book of His Dark Materials, they and I are also going to write a co-authored essay about Mary Malone. So if you're a His Dark Materials fan, we're going to take a look at how her character kind of negotiates science and religion. It's going to be really fun.
Okay, great stuff. Kelly, you gonna be anywhere doing anything soon? I hear maybe Sunday.
I believe Sunday I will be a guest on Here Be Dragons. We're going to talk about the second of, I guess, 3 episodes on reviews of WandaVision, 3 episodes at a time. I believe it's going to be 9 episodes, so we're going to be right smack in the middle of the season by Sunday.
Yeah.
So
good luck with J-Dubs on that one. He's going to get on to you for mentioning the comics. And I will be there for you in the chat defending you, Kelly.
Yeah.
Because comics readers matter. Comics readers matter. God damn.
Yep.
Get ready to battle with them content previews, right?
Oh yeah, content previews. Ooh, ooh.
Yeah. But yeah, I will be on Here Be Dragons talking about WandaVision. I'm a big comics nerd. And then of course in March, like Nessie said, I'll be on Bleep the Patriarchy talking about misogyny and patriarchy on board ships. then and now.
I'm so excited. That's going to be great. Really looking forward to having you officially, doing a stream with you. So that'll be great. And yeah.
Awesome.
So what's it like walking around without, a daemon and, his dark materials? Probably like living life as a ginger where you walk around with no soul, right? Yeah, that's how I
That must be tough.
I have a soul. It's just a very, deep pile of sludge and bile. Yeah.
It's okay. If you were a blonde, you would have more fun, but I understand we can't all be like that. So,
well, I'm feeling you there, Kelly. I'm feeling you. Yeah.
We're kind of mutants. It's just, it'd be like that.
And it is.
That was a pickup line that Professor X used in one of the prequel movies. He was like, "Oh, you have blah blah blah. It's a mutation. Oh, you're a redhead." And I was like, "Oh man, you're not getting laid tonight."
Yeah. Hey, green eyes and red hair are genetic mutations, which I carry proudly.
I have green eyes, so I'm a half mutant.
You're half mutant. Yeah, you're a mutant too. We can all be mutants.
And they're weird, and they change based on what I'm wearing. So I'm wearing green, so they look more green than usual. It's very weird.
Ridiculous Ed Tollett. I love that comment.
Yes. Oh yeah, I'm gonna pop that up real quick. Then we'll get to Stephen's question. I think everybody's had a chance to see that. So yeah, when you do say, when you are addressing someone, and you respond instinctively to something like ma'am, which yes, I'm from the South, and I know Stephen is as well, and we have a lot of things that are deeply indoctrinated in us as far as manners go, how you are to address people. So overcoming things like that, Stephen. Yeah, overcoming things like that. That's something we can all share. We can all talk about. In relation to that, what would be a better way of phrasing, or to obviously you want to think more instead of reacting more, because things come out of your mouth and you sound like, oh man, I wish I could just take that back in. Especially
and we all mess up. I think that I'm quote unquote woke, but I accidentally said, "All right, ladies," before we started the stream. Is like, frick. I mean, people, beautiful people. So we all mess up. I'm not over here on my high horse being like, I'm perfect with all my pronouns and everything. I'm always right. No, I mess up all the time.
Yes,
but I hope that people like Lo know that I'm coming from a good place, and I always correct myself.
I referred to my coworker by his dead name the other day, and I felt really bad. But he understands that I am learning, and he's just grateful for that. But it was just kind of like an instinctive, like first of all, he's 16. And he was sitting in cold water, and I was like, why are you doing that? You're going to get cold, you're going to get sick. So I was very just concerned about him. But it's one of those like things you just try to retrain your brain. And I think the most woke of us are likely to slip up.
Yeah, thank you, Blue Lemon Tree. Thank you from our Southern heart.
Which is why we say bleep it, y'all,
folks.
Yeah, because you got the two hosts of the show are both from the South, so we bleep it, y'all. That's what we do.
Yeah.
So, Lo, what are some suggestions for us and those in the chat and us watching, and those on the panel and those watching later? What do we say?
Yeah. I mean, for one, you like you say, you just have to rewire your brain. And when it comes to both, like if someone changes their name, if they change their pronouns, if you want to like learn how to not use gendered language, that's just something you need to train. But we will mess up. I mean, I mess up too. Just the other day I misgendered someone. I mean, it happens. But what I think is important is how we move forward after we have done a mistake. And that's just apologizing and trying to do better and not making an absolutely huge thing out of it. And just something that I think a lot of people can work on, and that like includes me with other things, is to not expect not phrase your apology in a way that you expect the person you're apologizing to say it's okay. Because that's something that happens to me like a million times. Someone will be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry," and then I'll feel like I have to say, "Oh, it's okay, it's no problem." And I mean, it's not okay. I don't feel okay. I don't want to feel like I have to say that it's okay for me to be polite. To just like work on how you're gonna apologize to someone and be okay with them saying like apology accepted, or just yes, okay, let's move on. And just like not centering yourself. And I think that's very important in a lot. Like if you mess up as a white person, is say something that's slightly racist, or if you're say like whatever, just don't center yourself and your feelings in your apology. Just make the apology and let the other person decide how to proceed after that.
Right. So don't place an undue burden, on the person that you have slighted in that way, in whatever way, because hey, they might really have been pissed off about that, and you could have hurt their feelings quite a bit. So
and looking to someone to absolve you, right, to make you feel, but that's putting a lot on them, and it's the burden is placed on the one who messes up to apologize, and they're obligated to do so, hopefully heartfelt, like really meaning it. But it's not the person who is being apologized to is not obligated ever to say that's okay. I mean, this is just a blanket statement for anything, but especially these issues. But any issue, right? And anytime anyone apologizes to me, I am not obligated to forgive them. Right then, right? It might take some time.
Right.
You can't expect just like a switch, and like you just switch an apology switch and then everything's fine. That's just not how life works, and that's not how emotions work. And something that I can relate to, Lo, is this idea of coming out as an everyday process, right? Anytime Lo is misgendered, they are coming out again. Which is why coming out is not an event. Every time, I'm dating a man, and so anytime I'm thirsting after a woman or something and someone doesn't know I'm bi, they're like, oh, like I had to come out again to that person. So coming out is a constant process, and misgendering is forcing the person to come out again, even if you already knew, right? It does remind, it could remind them of kind of just that it's not the norm. And I think that can be hurtful.
Right. Very good point.
mean, in like the way that society is structured is very binary. So, I mean, you constantly have to make that decision about like when do I want to have this fight? Like if I'm say at the hairdressers when it's not a pandemic going on, and they're like, just like an anecdote, I went to a hairdresser a while back, like last year, and they had a sign outside that said, women's haircut, this price. Men's haircut, this price. Children's haircut, this price. And I was like, okay, I'm going in with like this hair. I want you to like cut it off. I want a shorter hair. And they were like, oh, so you want like sort of a boy's haircut? And I'm like, yeah, sure. That's what I want. Yes, thank you. And then like sitting down in the chair, them doing my hair and being like, oh, so what is it you do for a living? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm studying gender studies. So it's like looking at sexism and racism, that sort of thing. And then they go on like a rant about how, oh, that's very important, but I don't like it when they talk to kids about that at too young of an age, because that will confuse them. If you talk about gender, that will confuse them. And I'm just like sitting in this chair that have like a razor to my skull, and I'm like, yes, I can see why you think that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just like, yeah, obviously I'm just confused. I'm just gonna confuse children by existing. Sorry about that. and just that's the sort of moment where you have to be like, okay, do I come out? No, obviously not. I can't come out to this person. And I'm stuck here for like an hour while they're doing my hair.
With half a haircut, you know.
I'm
Yeah.
so sorry,
And
Lo.
you storm out and you're like, oh, dang it, my hair looks terrible.
I know that.
Yeah.
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 What do you say?
I'm
I
so sorry. That is a horrible situation to be in.
Yeah.
And I think that's BS about children because
Oh,
of
yeah.
anything. Children are the most accepting of
Oh my God,
of
yes.
news, of
And
all.
they understand way more than we give them credit for.
Right.
Like,
They're, oh,
yeah.
okay. And let's go play with some blocks.
Yeah, no, and literally I had a little cousin that was like, my friend Alan has 2 daddies. That's cool. Amy, do you want to watch anime? Like, they just really like don't. It's
I
they
mean,
just move on.
my siblings' kids are like 8, and then there's 2 of them that are 5-year-old, and then there's 2 of them that are 4. And all of them, when they were born, I had a different name. I went by a different name. And all of them have learned to now call me Lo. So, I mean, it's fine.
It's
Yeah,
fine.
You're not going to confuse kids.
No.
But
Unless
you
you like, you can intentionally try to confuse them and like make them like, I don't know what to think anymore, you know. Or you could just let them just accept it, process it, put it on the little shelf with, you know, all the other things that they think about during the day or not think about at all. And
Right on,
Patriarchy. Damn it. Stop
hey,
it.
yeah,
Um,
Yogi's in the house. Hey,
there's one thing that you put in the outline that I definitely don't want us to overlook because I see it all the time on the internet where they're like, "Oh, then can I identify as a paperclip? Oh, can I identify as drywall? Can I identify as a lamp?" Lo, go ahead and tell us how freaking dumb that is, please.
Okay, so first backstory. I put that on the outline yesterday after teaching a class of 17-year-olds and being asked, hey, can I identify as a tree? And it was like, God, I have to bring this up on the stream. So, no, you can't identify as a tree or an attack helicopter or a tractor or a table or a wall.
or a cat. I mean,
No, you
I've had
can't.
people ask that facetiously, and I'm like, you know, yeah, making jokes. The whole joke thing is old and
Yeah,
tired.
and I mean, that I realized that now I'm sort of giving you my work response here. I realized that this is a meme, it's a joke, it's been spreading around the internet, is originally from 4chan, I think.
Ooh,
Uh,
no,
Well,
which
that's
there
is-
you go.
never
Ooh.
want to be
Ugh.
sharing something that's come from
Yeah.
that
No.
corner of the dark web.
No, and I mean, it's a joke. People say it as a joke, but as we all know, jokes can be used to demean people, to ridicule people, and just like make their experiences seem less important. So just saying it's a joke is not a good excuse. And no, you can't identify as a thing. You can identify as, say, a fan of a thing, a fan of A Song of Ice and Fire, a fan of historic materials, a fan of some sports ball team, but you can't identify as like a book. That's not a thing. And because gender is a human trait, it's a human identity, it's not a thing. And to yeah, you can be a fan of boats. To say that I identify as, say, an attack helicopter is just a way to dismiss what non-binary people and trans people experience, and it's already hard enough to convince people we exist. So just making these jokes are just unnecessary and ridicule and demean our experience. Yeah. And yeah, it's it's ridiculous. And something that I usually say to kids when I teach them is that it's very hard to understand what it's like to be trans or non-binary if you haven't experienced it yourself. I would say the way I sometimes explain it is, for instance, Amy, I'm telling
Yes.
you now, you're a guy. You're a man.
Okay.
How does that make you feel?
Well, now I can say everything confidently and people will believe it, so that's kind of cool. But I don't identify as a man, so I'm not cool with that.
And don't forget, you automatically
you don't
make
like
30%
you feel like
more money.
Yeah.
Yeah, hey, I should be being paid more then. But Lo, if you taking what you're saying seriously, because I'm not wanting to joke about this. This is an interesting exercise. I do feel then that you have some power over me that makes me uncomfortable. To say that I am something and it doesn't matter what I say in response.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's very. It seems like there's a lot of power dynamics when someone is misgendered, right?
Yeah. And you sort of have a feeling in your gut that, well, I'm not a guy though. This isn't accurate. And that's sort of how I would describe it, is you have this sort of gut feeling that, well, this is not true. And you feel like it's just incorrect when people say that to you. And so that's sort of my explanation, what it's like to be trans or non-binary. And that you just feel like it's wrong when people label you in a certain way. But sort of the most important thing is you don't have to understand it to respect it. You don't have to understand what it's like to respect that someone else has this experience, and you should respect them and the way that they identify and the way they want to be called, for instance.
I think something that I often do is ask, is what I'm about to say to someone going to be validating them or invalidating them? I don't feel like there's an in-between. You can't be like there are often these platitudes that I hate that are like, oh, if you want to wear that label, then good for you. No, they are. I am, right? So like, I am bi. I don't just choose to identify by this label, right? People do use the language I identify as. That doesn't mean that is not their being, if that makes sense. That's kind of how I've come to understand it, just through my experiences with people in the LGBTQIA plus community. And community is a very, I use that loosely in this term because we fight all the time. Just like family.
Yeah.
I think
it's not like wearing a shirt. It's not like
that is binary to think it's either validating or invalidating. This is what the binary is okay, because it's not an in-between. It's not like I'm semi-supportive. You know what I'm saying? Like, you either support someone or you don't. And that's kind of how I see it.
I think what Lo was saying about the ridiculous suggestion of being asked if someone can identify as an inanimate object. Lo is already, and people like them are already trying to be treated as human. And then you have someone asking if they can identify as something less than human, something non-human, an inanimate object. So it's even worse. There's people that are treated, as fellow humans or subhumans, and then to even go even lower to an inanimate object is especially insulting and cringy. And it's not even surprising that it comes from 4chan, going that route.
And frankly, it's not funny.
Yeah,
it's just not. I mean, if we just look at it on a comedic level, you have to be transphobic to find it funny. I don't want to find that funny, because then that says something about me. So, first of all, it's wrong to even be telling that joke. And then second of all, if you do find it funny, maybe do some soul searching, because that's not cool.
Yeah. As someone with privilege, it is what we were saying earlier about the dynamic between an apology and a forgiveness. As someone with privilege, if I apologize, as someone with privilege, I do expect to be forgiven almost immediately. And that is something that another part of our brains that we have to rewire. Mm-hmm. For those of us also with any kind of privilege, we feel like the onus is on those without privilege to explain the concept of privilege to us. And I do want to say that I do appreciate Lo taking time, taking their time to teach us a little bit more about their life and the battles that they go through. But again, it should not be put on someone who is marginalized or oppressed or without privilege to, explain their experience and their pain, or that, as far as like, as someone who is Caucasian, expecting someone of color to explain why should I care about racism, or tell me how America is racist, because racism doesn't exist. We elected someone who was of color. So it should not be the onus should not be on the oppressed and the those without privilege to explain. I think there was a phrase or an expression I read somewhere where someone with privilege looked around the room and realized and saw the voices that weren't there, those that were not being represented in a room, and it's important to speak up for those whose voices are not being heard.
Right. And when those of us who have privilege, like myself, Kelly, when we mess up, and we have to be okay with being told all about ourselves, how we've messed up. If that person is not true, doesn't want to forgive you, we have to be okay with that, because we were the ones who made the mistake, and should not automatically expect. That's the thing. Expectation of something is like the height of privilege. You expect to be forgiven. Don't expect to be forgiven. Just know that you effed up and do better. Your next encounter with that person will hopefully go better, especially if you are making strides and improvement, and you don't mess up again, but you've got to be okay with being, like I said, told all about yourself. We have to be okay with that. Whether you made it.
Where did this attack helicopter comparison come from anyway?
I don't even know. And I actually had a friend in undergrad who she was a Black woman, and she literally stopped talking to me because of something I said, and I've never talked to her again. And that's just something I have to live with, because I effed up. I bleeped up, if you will. And it's totally within her right to end the friendship because of what I did, right? So I think we're so scared of wanting to hold on to something that, it's not on us to try and, get it fixed, because we've done our due diligence of apologizing, and that's all we can do. And if we're trying to be like, well, you owe me, you owe forgiving me, that's very, very the wrong way to think about it. So yeah. And kind of like Jolie was saying, people don't owe you an explanation. People don't owe you forgiveness. And it's tough because that, a lot of people that I talk to about this, especially my family, except for my parents, talk about how they feel like they're walking on eggshells around people of color and around trans people, because they don't have the vocabulary and you know what? Feel uncomfortable. If you go through your whole life as a white person not feeling uncomfortable, you've done something wrong. And that's just that. I mean, I didn't, in my high school, even though it had people of color, we segregated ourselves. So I really didn't interact with people of color until I was in undergrad. And that was when that friend broke up with me, because I learned from that though. And so you just have to put yourself out there and be uncomfortable and make mistakes. That's the only way that we learn this kind of thing, really learn it, instead of just having like a PowerPoint presentation given to us about racism. That's no substitute for experience.
Yeah. I cherish my kindergarten experience, because I learned so much that year that wasn't in books. And, it's like, poof, you're in this world. You need to adapt yourself and become part of it. And it's not about being different. It's just about being a part of the group and accepting and being accepted for who you are, and that you're valid as a human, you're valid as a person just on that merit from, your accomplishments. You own your mistakes and you bear it and move on and become you use it to grow from, be better, not best. Be best sucks. Be better.
Well, another cringe element right there.
Oh man.
So, I'm still learning every day. And I want to learn until, the day my human body shuts down and I become, plant material. So I hope and pray that I do learn something new and better myself every day, to be a better Nessie. So that's like goals. Yay. So
we didn't want to make this whole stream about this, but Lo, something that Nessie and I wanted to talk to you about, and I know Kelly also might find this interesting as well, is how, since we say we do feminist analysis, part of being feminist is accepting trans women into the movement. So let's talk about TERFs, shall we? I'm sorry. God. I know, we got it. It's a little bit in my mouth. Okay, I'm okay.
Right. It's kind of the elephant in the living room.
It is, and I feel like
house that's just made a big shit pile in the middle of the rug. And
so let's talk about how some feminists are failing because they have I think they have. Lo, don't they have a nice word for themselves that's like gender critical or something like that?
Yes, because they don't think gender exists; they just think sex exists. Is the short version of why they call themselves that. They think that we should just focus on sex and how sex Micah. How sex is the root of all oppression, and how gender is just made up. And funnily enough, they have this view in common, that the view that gender doesn't exist, they have that in common with right-wing extremists and conservatives. Very interesting how that happened.
Eat that one, TERFs.
Yeah, but I feel like every time I talk about TERFism in like contemporary society, I need to do exactly, Isabel. And I just need to give you a brief historical background. So if you go back until like the 70s, basically, you have trans people finally getting a bit more rights. You have like the Stonewall riots, you have the Compton cafeteria riots, if anyone knows what that is. That was in the 60s anyway. So trans people getting a smidge more rights and access to things like healthcare, a smidge, and just a tiny bit, and wanting obviously to be involved in feminism, because feminism a true feminism would bring down the patriarchy, and that would benefit cis women and trans women. But some feminists, for instance Mary Daly or Janice Raymond or Sheila Jeffords, were like, nah, but no thank you. And they argued that trans women aren't actually women, but that they were, how did he put it, necrophilic agents inserting themselves into women-only spaces. And essentially they argued that trans women are actually men raping female bodies just by one pretending to be women, and especially then if they're lesbian and having sex with women, then they're sexually abusing those women because they're just pretending to be women.
Wow.
So
that is some stuff.
That's some stuff, and that's something that like actual feminist researchers and like scholars wrote about these people that I mentioned, Janice Women, for instance. And then they obviously also went after trans women and trying to eject them from feminist communities, saying that women born women are the only ones who are allowed in feminist spaces and separatist spaces. For instance, you might have heard of the Michigan Women Festival, I think it's called, Women with an Y. There's
Wait,
a long
where is the Y and the women with the?
So men. So you don't want to put men in the word. So yeah, it replaces the E.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anyway,
thought you
long
were Y
history.
Why really though? Why men?
Yeah,
Womeny.
why men?
It's womeny.
But yeah, long history of certain branches of feminism not wanting anything to do with trans women. And then sort of fast forward a bit, and we still have the same arguments being made today. If you look at things that, I mean, J.K. Rowling and other people are saying, it's very similar. They think that trans women aren't women. They're just men in dresses pretending, maybe just pretending, or maybe just being mentally ill or something. And like the Blue Lemon Tree says here, TERF arguments just holds up biological essentialism in the end. And they argue that to be a true woman, you have to be born with a female body and go through all the steps of becoming a woman with menstruation or whatnot. And the thing that they don't realize is that not even every cis woman experiences womanhood the same way. Some people don't menstruate. Some people are, not white and therefore experience womanhood in a different way. You can't just say that every woman across every class, every race, every country is the same. There's no purpose in doing that. And TERFs don't realize that. They just want to focus on their experience of womanhood and how they're oppressed by that, and not think about how they're privileged in other ways.
And Lo, something that I was actually talking about in my archives course, we're talking about feminist archiving and queering the archive. We also talked about claiming universalism is inherently privileged, right? Saying that, oh, all women have the same experience. You notice it's only white women that are saying that, because women of color are going, no, we do not. What are you talking about? And I think this is a really great point by Isabel. It's inherently unfeminist. And Lo, you and I talk about this a lot, how we identify as feminist, and part of that is that we don't want to judge others for their decisions, and we also don't necessarily want to say who is a good and bad feminist. But I could say with certainty they are bad feminists. They should not call themselves feminists if you do not accept trans women into the movement. That is inherently unfeminist. And you can at me, I don't care.
Here's the hill upon which we shall die.
I don't say that all. I really never say you're not a good feminist, but that is the one thing that I do judge people who say they're feminists for. If they don't full-heartedly and enthusiastically, like, you don't have to drag them into accepting trans women, like enthusiastically, cannot wait to talk about trans women's rights in a feminist context. That is exactly what feminism was created for.
Yeah, and then also something that they're especially nowadays very good at doing, both J.K. Rowling and feminist in a Swedish context called Cissi Wallin, who's I realize none of you know who she is, but she's been like a very very big center figure for Swedish feminism for a long time. she recently said that that sorry, being distracted by the comments.
I'm sorry. I'm just like,
It's a
Um,
comment. It's a good question, though. Yeah.
yeah. No, but what she said is that there's something that's been talked about a lot here recently is, and in the UK, I know that a lot of people who were assigned female at birth are percentage-wise more people who were assigned female at birth are coming out as trans or non-binary in recent years compared to before. Obviously, it's still not a big number, but like comparatively. And people are like, oh, but that's just because they're girls who dislike the patriarchy and gender norms. They're not actually trans or non-binary. They just don't like sexism. And they are just confused about
Ooh, confused.
their
Isn't
gender.
that the best word?
Yeah.
Yay.
and it didn't have anything to do with them being more comfortable and feeling safer about, you know, expressing these types of things. It wouldn't have anything to do with that.
No.
And I don't think toxic masculinity at all plays a role in people assigned male at birth finding it harder to be themselves and be comfortable in their transness. I'm pretty sure none of this has to do with any of that. So
They don't want to fix society so that they cannot use that reason to justify their turfism.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there. I mean, if you look at early trans readings, like medical readings, for instance, the person who sort of developed the way we see trans currently in the Western sense and wrote the like first diagnostic manual for diagnosing being trans, Harry Benjamin, he pretty much only recognized trans women as being trans. He more or less didn't think trans men existed. And just my take on that, influenced by other writings, of course, is that for a woman to be more masculine is more accepted by society than it is for a man to be more feminine. So
Yes.
that type of transgressive behavior was more likely to be seen as, you know, mentally ill or bad or wrong in some ways. Trans.
It does come back to that hierarchy as well,
Yeah.
because of course it's understandable that someone who was assigned a female at birth wants to quote be a man because that's
they
better,
move
right?
up the ladder.
They move up the ladder. Boo.
Isabel out here spitting bars.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
She's a spitfire, man. I'll just pop these up.
I also think
Gems.
that it also kind of comes back around to this idea of, you know, like labels and how quote unquote labels, which I, you know, automatically kind of have a bit of a blasé kind of term, but that they can be empowering, and that, you know, owning a label is not, it's not just about being more understandable and intelligible to other people. It's also about, you know, making sense of yourself as well. And so that's why I kind of don't like the way that people dismiss labels as like, oh, I wish we didn't have to use labels, but, you know, I guess that's what we have to do now. You know, no, labels are actually can be really empowering for people. And so I think that, you know, when we use things like cis and hetero and bisexual, right, like the and trans, these, even being able to use these words, right? Heterosexual for so long has been considered the norm and the default. So the fact that we even use that term, you know, is actually can be empowering, because you have to, you know, now people that are quote unquote the norm have to even identify. So if we're all kind of identifying, then it empowers all of us, right? And so, you know, going back to Stephen's question of, as a cis hetero man, can I be a feminist? Absolutely. Everyone can be a feminist as long as they have the right outlook. My main problem is, and yes, you're exactly right, Stephen, that if you give the labels to yourself, that's the good, you don't want other people labeling you. But my problem, and I'm thinking of a certain ex, are men who say they are feminists and do not act. Feminism is an act, it's a process, and it's a practice. When in gender studies, I'm sure Lo can back this up, we talk about feminist practice. That means we're not good at it yet. We're not perfect. There is no perfect. You're constantly doing. And so a part of feminist practices is doing things like accepting, trans women as women, and speaking out against gender discrimination, not gender, but I also speak out against gender discrimination, just to be clear, but gender discrimination. So yeah, anyone can be a feminist. It's about what you do and how you think, and we are all going to make mistakes. Every feminist makes a mistake, but that he, she, or they realize when they have made a mistake, and they try to be better.
Be better.
Not best.
Not best. Yeah. And those are things we can all do and all take to heart. Like I was saying earlier, I make mistakes all the time. I am human. And apparently that's, part of being human is effing up quite a bit. So, and it's the process. It's all about the process, and it's all about going forward, moving forward. And as things change, recognizing that things change and are never going to be static, stay the same. I hope not. Hopefully we have, things in the future that like, oh, here's something new. Who knew this thing was a thing? And I accept it greatly. I accept it wholeheartedly. Person.
That's why we have the plus at the end, right? Of LGBTQIA plus. I always say plus because there's going to be something that I don't know about, and I'm excited to learn about it. And and the LGBTQIA plus community can also be just as kind of a little bit not great as far as, except like for gender nonconforming people, asexual and aromantic people are just now starting to kind of be able to be accepted. I mean, and so, the trans community, the T part of LGBT, when it was just those four, have always been kind of the most downtrodden. And now they're kind of accepted in. And now it's, who are these asexual people? They don't want to have sex at all. That's weird, right? So it's like, no, you thought trans was weird 15 years ago. Like, come on, we have to keep moving forward, right? That's why we have the plus there. And if you automatically, if your reaction is, well, that's weird, then that means there's work to be done, and there's soul searching to be done. My parents didn't know about non-binary until like last year when I told them that I had made an amazing non-binary friend named Lo, right? And my mom was like, "What is that?" And I talked to her about it, and she was very interested and very exciting to learn about something new. And that's exactly, and she's a baby boomer, so like, there's, no matter how old dogs can learn new tricks.
Yeah. Be like dogs. They're very
like
acceptable.
Dogs.
That's goals. Just accept people who are.
But do not make a comment that you identify as a dog. Please.
Oh my God!
Don't make that comment. No, because none of us are good enough.
No, we are not worthy.
That's not worthy.
Just be as accepting as Russell.
Be like a dog. Oh, Russell, be like a dog. Be sitting at the door, excited for the next, wave of labels to open the door, and you're like, "Oh my God, I'm so excited you're here! Welcome! I'm gonna rub my belly." Right? That's exactly. Be like a dog is what we're saying. Be just as excited and enthusiastic and accepting as dogs.
Yeah. Be who you are. Wear what you want to. Love who you want to, or no one. Just be happy in your own skin, and we love you just as you are. Thanks.
Always, Russell. Always, he deserves those treats. When he sleeps, he dreams of smashing the patriarchy. That's why he sleeps all the time. Russell's not a lazy dog. He is a feminist dog.
Very much so. He is very busy on the astral plane, smashing and bleeping the patriarchy wherever he goes. He's like the knight of the patriarchy. Wow. smash it. Yes, subconsciously directing all of our thoughts. Thank you, Russell. You do great work.
Oh, he's so cute. Oh my God, I want to rub his belly.
Well, we're getting on to the 2-hour mark, friends. If you have any questions in the chat that you want to, us to address, now's the time to do that. If there are any points or things that our panelists would like to get out there that we really want to get discussed, like now's a good time to talk about it. Let's bring it out. Let's just pull it out and poke it a little bit.
I need to reserve mine for next month, though. This is I want to hear Lo's voice. My voice is going to come later on.
Okay, Lo, is there anything you from the document that we haven't discussed that you want to discuss more in more detail?
Wasn't there an outline spoken of or somewhere?
There was an outline.
We have an outline.
I mean,
it is there.
I have one point that's like super big, and I don't know if we want to get into it. But I have written queer theory plus trans theory.
Let's do that.
So I have also written, I'll try to explain this briefly-ish. That it says that in the outline. So a lot of people have probably heard of queer theory, I assume, and some of you might have heard it and have no idea what it is. That's totally fine. But something about part of queer theory that I think is very useful to think about when we think about gender and binary is this sort of idea that for someone's gender to make sense to society, be coherent, you have to have to be a coherent woman, for instance, you have to have a female body, act feminine, and be attracted to men. You have to have all of these three things to be a proper woman according to society. So if you're a lesbian, you're not really a real woman. People will probably think, oh, but they're a bit masculine, they're a bit mannish. Or if you're a guy who's gay, people will assume you're a bit more feminine, for instance. So that part of queer theory was articulated by, for instance, Judith Butler in the 90s. And then trans theorists have sort of expanded on that in later years. So, for instance, Susan Stryker, who's someone who inspires me a lot, wrote about how, as a trans person, you either have to make yourself fit into the gender category you're placed in at birth, or you have to transgress this boundary of the abject, this zone of the abject, that weird monster freaky place that people who don't fit in are placed. You have to transgress that to get to the other side that makes sense according to society. And even then you might not properly be let into that side. You still might be on the outskirts of the weird. So personally in my research, I'm very interested in this zone of the abject, this place for all of the queer freaks, I guess, where all of us are placed. And someone who also inspires me a lot is a researcher called Sara Ahmed, and she writes a lot about straight lines, as she calls them, and how we're all expected to follow certain lines throughout our life. So if you're born with a vagina, you're gonna grow up, be raised as a girl, you're gonna meet a boy, you have a crush on him, and then when you're old enough, at a proper age, you're gonna get married and have kids, and then you're gonna have grandkids, and that's just that way is how your life is gonna progress. And if you deviate at some point from this, then you're a bit queer. If you don't get together with men, that's weird. If you don't want to have kids, that's weird. And then this also intersects with other lines like whiteness, and how if you don't follow those lines of whiteness, you're not white, you don't have a in your case American sounding name, or in my case a Swedish sounding name, then you're gonna get stopped in society in certain ways. People are gonna look at you and say, hey, why are they here? And obviously if your gender doesn't follow this line, then you're also gonna get like roadblocks in your way. So if you say if you're a trans woman, but your ID doesn't is still male because you haven't had a legal gender change, then like imagine all the times you need to show an ID. People are going to be like, wait, why does this say male on the ID? And there's a roadblock. Or if you're like, say you're a Muslim woman and you wear the hijab and you're going to an airport, people are going to be like, wait, that thing on your head, you're a terrorist, we're going to pat you down right now. And that's a roadblock. So there's these norms and lines we're supposed to follow throughout life, and if we deviate from them, we're queer or weird in some way, and we're put in the box of the queer and weird things, or we're gonna meet roadblocks on the way. And because the binary only allows certain lines, there's male and female lines, and you're gonna have to follow all the other lines, like whiteness, able-bodiedness. You're gonna there's only like one good way to do it, and if you're not following that, then you're out of line, and something's wrong with you.
And you get to go live in the uncanny valley with. Actually, that's not such a bad place name. Actually, Uncanny Valley.
Honestly, that'd be a great party. Like, I bet everyone's really is having fun there, though. You know, I mean, everyone should be accepted, but I'm just saying, like, if you've ever been to a gay club, like, that is where the party is at. If you're like, you guys just all be over here and congregate, like, okay, we're gonna have a great time.
Yeah.
Sounds
Throw
good
me
to
in
me.
the uncanny. Throw me right there in the Uncanny Valley. I'll be happy.
Yeah,
like
and
a great
also just, I mean, on sort of along those same lines, I know we've been talking about all of the crap things about being non-binary and being trans, and I just really want to emphasize that I would not trade it for the world. Like, if you gave me a magic pill to be cis, I would not take it. And I feel like we've made a lot of strides in recent years. There's a super long way to go, but things are getting better, and people are fighting like hell to make them better. And I wouldn't trade being me, even if things suck sometimes. Yeah. So even if I personally also tend to focus on the negatives a lot of the time when I write things, I don't want to give the impression that it's all sad and gloominess, because it's really not. It's also just seeing more colors of the world, and questioning things that other people take for granted makes you see the world in different ways. So it's really not all bad.
Yeah, considering where we were even 20 years ago, 50 years ago, hundreds of years ago, I think that we're at a much better place than we were historically. So much, as you say, Lo, we have a long way to go, but by God, we have come a long way too. And it's better to live in the society we have now, where you're able to at least express yourself freely and openly, and have people around that are supportive and kind and accepting, than the alternative, which was not good. Not good. So
Yeah, and even though the internet can be a terrible, shitty place, it has also allowed people of all different walks of life to come together and kind of create a little community, kind of like we've created here. So
yeah. Yep. All right. And there was one question from the chat. I wanted to bring that back. And a few people had said something, so I'm going to pop it up. And this was about the apology. Yeah. So a few people in the chat have asked. So what are some of the best ways to apologize when making we'll say gender slip up, or you could insert other marginalized person in there as well. But yeah, for the specific extreme, what is a good way of making an apology? I mean, obviously we are assuming that it is a sincere apology and not just, oops, I fucked up and I don't want to get in trouble at work because I'm an asshole. But yes, from the heart.
I think it partly depends on the situation. I mean, if you're like one-on-one hanging out with someone and you misgender them in some way, then obviously you can like do a bit more, take a bit more time for it and say like, hey, shit, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. I'll try to do better. Is it, and like, what do you want me to do? Is there like, yeah, just like talk it out, I guess. But if you're, for instance, say you're in a work meeting and there's 10 other people, and you mess up, that's not the time to like make a huge deal out of it and say like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'll never ever do this again. God, I'm so sorry, I'm the worst. Oh, like, don't do that, because that's just gonna be awkward for everyone, including the person you're apologizing to. So just like say, oh, sorry, I meant them. I meant to say she. I meant to say all of you people. And then sort of move on from that and maybe approach the person privately later and say, I'm so sorry I said that. Is there anything I can do to make it up for you? Or like, just make sure to address them. And maybe they're just gonna be like, totally fine, happens all the time, let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
Because honestly, it happens all the time and it's exhausting to have to like absolve every person for it. It would take up so much of my time to do that.
That's a lot of energy.
Yeah, and I just, just one instance, I know I complained on Twitter a while back about how I was I heard someone say ladies and gentlemen in an instance, and I was like, oh God, do they have to say that all the time? And someone was like, oh, but email the company in charge of this and make a complaint. I'm like, no, I can't do that. I can't email everyone. Oh God, so many emails. They'll make you email an email.
I know, right? You hear that all the time too. You also like politicians will say, the men and women of the armed forces. I know they think they're being inclusive, but they're really not. Just say the troops or the soldiers. We know now that people of all different genders serve. There's no need to be like men and women of the armed forces. That is leaving out people.
I mean, I sort of agree, but also, I mean, in some instances, there is a point to say men and women to like point out that you mean all people, but then say men, women, and everyone else. and then you're even more inclusive, or something similar. So, I mean, in the armed forces example, you could say the men, women, and every other soldier of other genders who serve, or something. Because in some instances, there's a point to saying specific genders. Because I know if I don't say that, I'm gonna get shit from certain parts of the feminist movement who think I'm erasing women. Read an
We're still
article
here,
about
don't
that
worry
just
about it.
earlier today.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Lo. I appreciate your honesty and speaking from your experiences. I think we've all learned something today, and hopefully we'll continue to to do that. Oh, Stephen, I've just got to pop this up here.
That's an excellent expression. Actually, I love that, because I do sometimes get very frustrated when people say guys and gals, and I'm like, I see what you're trying to do, but
Yep, we're just going to add that one onto the list. So, yep, appropriate phrases. Well, okay, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I think that's going to wrap it up for today. It's been a great episode. I appreciate each and every one of you. Stay till the end. I'd like to thank the panel. They did a fantastic job. Lo, appreciate you so much for coming today. Aemy, you're best. You're the best. Appreciate it. Thank you, Kelly, for joining us on such a spur of the moment thing and bringing.
Thank you for inviting me. This was fun. I was going to be here anyway, but yeah.
Well, I'm glad. And hey, we might do something like this again. We might have a mystery guest. Who knows? Someone who's there in the chat. If you has something extraordinary or valid they want, you just have to get it out.
You never know what's going to happen.
You never know.
Patriarchy.
We can bleep
Jazz
it anyway. So on that note, thank you all so much for coming, and we'll see you again next time. Bye.